Hello and welcome to this video of exception handling in Cyclone RPA Designer. This video is divided into three parts: the concept of exceptions and its handling, the components related to exception handling, and common ways of handling exceptions. First, let's learn about exceptions. When robots are carrying out an automated process, there could be unexpected errors that interrupt the execution. These errors, known as exceptions, are mostly predictable and can be handled or avoided in the designing of automated processes. For example, when we use the Open File node to open a specific file, but in fact the file doesn't exist, the process will be stuck and report an error. To avoid this, we can first determine whether the file exists, then accordingly open or create the file. It is essential for process designers to foresee exceptions and properly handle them in the process, improving the reliability of automation. Next, let's have a look at the nodes related to handling exceptions in Cyclone RPA Designer. Many nodes in the designer have built-in options to handle exceptions, and we can choose from throw an error, ignore, and retry. When we choose throw an error, we should also set the exception information, which would appear in console information once the exception occurs. Choose ignore and the system will skip the node if any exception occurs. If we choose retry, we need to specify the numbers of retry and the interval between two retried attempts. Sometimes the node may be executed correctly after several attempts. If the system has retried for the specified times and still failed to execute the node as expected, the error information would still be displayed in the console. In addition, we have a dedicated try-catch node to handle exceptions. It has three branches. The first branch, named try, is where we put in the process with predictable exceptions. The second branch, catch, is where we put in the handling solutions. And the third branch, finally, is the place for nodes that need to be executed regardless of exceptions. In the next part, let's learn about the common ways of handling exceptions. There are three types of exceptions in general. The first one is unexpected pop-up boxes. For instance, when applications are launched, a login box would sometimes pop up to interrupt the process execution. When this happens, we should add a node to click the close button of the login box, and if such box doesn't appear, which means no interruption occurs, the exception handling of this node should be to ignore. Now, let's have a try in the designer. Add a flow and name it PopUp box, and then add a click node. Capture the close button, and then set the exception handling to ignore, meaning that if the system can't find the button, in other words, the box didn't pop up, this node would be skipped altogether. The second exception type is files not found. For example, when the Excel file we want to open doesn't exist, the process may either attempt to create a blank file or fail to create such a file and thus can't proceed. In this case, we should use try-catch node to catch the exception. Let's simulate the occurrence in the designer. Start with an Open Excel Workbook node. Designate the file path and be sure to choose Do Not Create Automatically in case the process creates a blank workbook of the same name. Then name the output. Next, add a read cell node. And set the file to the output of the previous node. Name the data output. Because the file path we designated in the first node doesn't exist, so there would be an exception. To avoid this, we can add a try-catch node. And drag the two nodes into try branch as the default process. In catch branch, we need to specify what the process should be like if anything is wrong. Choose all exceptions and name the output as exception. Add an output information to console to show us the exception information from the previous node. Then, in Finally branch, add a Close Excel Workbook node, which means that no matter the process is executed as expected or not, the last step is always to close the workbook. Debug the process, and we can see the exception information. Also, the workbook is closed. The third exception type is web pages loaded too slowly. When this happens, some nodes related to web page operations, such as to click a link or to input something in the text box, can't be executed normally. In this case, we should again use try-catch node to catch the exception information and utilize for loop and break loop nodes to make repeated attempts until the web page is successfully loaded. In the designer, first add an open browser node. Choose a browser and input the address. Then add a click node and capture a link. To handle the exception during these two nodes, add a try-catch node. Drag the nodes into it, and choose all exceptions. Name the output. And use the output information to console node to notify us. We can specify the information to web page load error. Lastly, the browser should be closed whatever happens, so add a Close Tabs node in Finally branch and choose the browser we used. Be sure to choose address bar as match object and input the correct address. If anything unexpected happens when closing the tab, we can just let the process to ignore it. Then add a for loop node and drag the try-catch node into it to let the process make multiple attempts before giving up. For example, we can set the end value to 3, which means up to 3 attempts would be made. Next, in try branch, add a break loop node at the end to ensure that if an attempt goes successful, the remaining unnecessary loop would be skipped over. In this video, we have covered 3 common exception types and their respective handling methods. Be sure to check other videos and our website for more information. Thanks for watching and see you next time.